Now, one person we did hear from today for the first time, Karen Reed herself, doubling down, of course, saying she did not do this. She wants to know who did.
Said it feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
And no, she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in the only one trying to save his life.
Why'd you admit to it?
She didn't admit to it. She didn't admit to anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And you should know that.
That was like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it.
No, she didn't.
That's not true.
She asked a question. She asked a question, which is very different. She didn't admit to anything.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
All right. How is everybody? You know, I'm just watching this opening clip of Karen Reed and I'm like, not again. That's how I'm feeling. Not again. Do I have to talk about this ridiculous innocence fraud campaign again? Again. Because Karen Reed is doing a media tour. Just hit the mic. Sorry, guys. RIP people with headphones. With my hand. Making wild gestures over here. I'm just over this. I'm so over this case. I'm over Karen Reed. I am feeling like this is the most ridiculous innocence fraud campaign. Every single one of them is ridiculous. And yet every single one of them manages to fool the public. Some section of the public. I mean, come on. This thing, this piece of trash in Vanity Fair written by Julie Miller, who embedded herself with Karen Reed for 3 days and who has written love letter pieces to the Menendez brothers and to Michael Peterson. Michael Peterson's horror, his and his adopted daughter's horror as they go through. Not, you know, forget the women he's killed. Forget the horror of their families have gone through. It's the killer's horror that she likes to write about. Anyway, Julie Miller, this writer for Vanity Fair, embedded herself with Karen Reed, like had a slumber party. She's like, I brought my own groceries. Oh, well, that's keeping up journalistic ethics there. I brought my own groceries over. This thing is ridiculous. And it reads like a Penni novel. Oh, Karen Reed didn't know this innocent woman was up against the big, thin blue line, the blue wall of silence. She didn't know who to turn to. And then she found David Yannetti, the handsome lawyer to come to her rescue. I mean, this thing is outrageous. I mean, Vanity Fair should be so ashamed for printing this pro-killer, absolute innocence fraud, fictional nonsense. I mean, how long is it going to take till the Karen Reed people wake up? I mean, they're just like, you know, one of the big reveal today. So this, let me go back. This was published in 2 parts. So the first part was published yesterday, the second part today. And the big reveal is that Karen Reed dumpster dived into the Albert's home and got carpet. Never mind that. My understanding is that that basement was never carpeted. So it's some carpet from the home. And she needs to get it DNA tested, guys. She just needs the money. Never mind that she says she's $5 million in debt from her legal team expenses. And I don't know if that's exaggerated. We have an unreliable narrator here. So I would think that she can't be doing financially great given the cost of these kind of lawyers. But 5 million seems a little steep even to me. But we're going to go through it. We're going to look at some of the coverage of the Vanity Fair article and debunk some of it. I mean, it really needs its own. I really need to come back and go through this thing with a fine-tooth comb. It's so outrageous and debunk every little piece of it. But today we're just going to sort of look at the overview of the coverage of it and look at some key points that need debunking and the media's reaction to it. So the media's reaction to it, spoiler alert, is that it's an unusual interview. Forget journalistic ethics, forget getting too close to your subject. Forget that. This is now an unusual article, guys. It's quite unusual. It's not morally questionable. And of course, they call her an accused criminal in the article, not an accused murderer. She's like, I didn't know I was coming in. So Julie Miller writes, like, I was coming into Karen Reed's home. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Coming into Karen Reed's home 6 months pregnant with my own groceries. And my family was worried about staying with an accused criminal. No, you're staying with an accused murderer. Like, let's not sugarcoat this. I mean, everything is sugar-coated. Everything is from Karen Reed's perspective and from the Free Karen Reed cult playbook media lines. And they're presenting this to the public like it's a good journalistic, dug deep, found the truth, fair article. It's absurd. So let's get into the first one. And it's called Karen Reed's unusual, right? Karen Reed's unusual article in Vanity Fair. Let's take a listen together.
Other things, we learned that Karen Reed is hurting financially, but legal experts don't think that was the driving force for this interview. Karen Reed's tell-all in Vanity Fair. Legal experts call it part of a calculated and aggressive strategy by her defense team.
She clearly would like to tell her story and not be cross-examined by anybody else.
Martha Coakley says the strategy does have its risks. According to the article, Reed invited the reporter into her Mansfield home for 3 days with no ground rules and no lawyers.
Right. So that's to make us think that, well, Karen Reed invited the journalist in with no ground rules and no lawyers. So, I mean, that's what an innocent person would do, wouldn't they? That's what an innocent person would do. But of course, Karen Reed has always opened her mouth to her own detriment. How many people did she tell at the crime scene that I hit him? What was it, like 6 or 7? Forgive me if it's less or more. Seemed like endless witnesses, all saying some variation of, I did this, I hit him. Is he dead? I hit him. And now that's been reduced in this article to one line, one question. Oh, Karen Reed asked one question that would become her detriment, which was, did I hit him? It was preceded by a did and proceeded by a question mark. I mean, how dumb can you get? This is so dumb. It's so dumb, it's hard to believe. But okay, here we go.
There is all this evidence now that she's put out there in terms of what she thought or did or didn't and what she said. Some of it may help her, some of it may not. But it certainly is a lot of evidence for a prosecutor to use. And as this case goes forward to trial, it could also backfire against her.
Reed is awaiting her second trial for the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The first ended in a mistrial. According to the article, Reed is now living off her 401k, sold her house to pay her legal bills, and still owes more than $5 million to her attorneys. But she says, quote, I'm not...
Should we all get out the world's smallest violin for Karen Reed? Karen Reed is living off her 401k. She's a pauper going from Free Karen Reed fundraiser to Free Karen Reed fundraiser. Sorry, I don't have zero sympathy. Any sympathy that I would have had for her going through this is gone when you attack the victim's family and you when you mastermind a witness intimidation campaign. Sorry. Gone are all my sorry feelings for you going to court, because of course, our legal system, like every other area of life, favors the rich. You get better representation, better treatment, and many times better results. Although the greatest legal team I ever saw was in Larry Ray's trial, which I covered from the courtroom, and that was a court-appointed federal defense team, and they were dynamite. So sometimes you get lucky.
Not backing down now. I will go to jail for something I didn't do before I plea out. I will never give them that win. Reed accuses police of framing her, focusing on her SUV, which police say she used to hit and kill O'Keefe. Pieces of a broken taillight were found in the area where O'Keefe's body was found, but Reed claims the light wasn't smashed until after police seized it. It's the only concrete evidence that connects me to that crime, she says. No evidence.
Really? Isn't that interesting that Karen Reed says it's the only piece of concrete evidence, the taillight, that connects her to the crime? Never mind her car data that shows her going in reverse 24 miles an hour backwards without ever hitting the brake and hitting something. Never mind that. There's tons of evidence against her. So it's interesting, in this Vanity Fair article, it echoes Karen Reed exactly. It says the only piece of evidence, she did herself in by saying, did I hit him? That caused much confusion, just asking that one simple question. So ridiculous. And then it goes further and says that the big piece of evidence against her, the only piece of concrete evidence against her, is the taillight, which is absurd. I mean, we'll go through all the evidence against her. John O'Keefe's sneaker, her car data, her text messages, the witnesses, what she said. I mean, she told Jennifer and Matt McCabe that she had smashed up her taillight way before that love tap at 5:08 a.m. I mean, come on. Everyone else is lying but Karen Reed. She's not only up against the blue wall of silence, she's up against all these friends that she came to in her hour of need, or suddenly the devil, and all want to frame her for a murder she didn't commit because they're all secretly murderers themselves, guys. Isn't that amazing? It's so absurd. I'm going to hit the roof by the end of this episode. I can't take it. I can't take another one of these innocence fraud campaigns. It's too much. Too much. There's only so much one person can take.
Was found until they had the evidence. This is part one of the interview. Vanity Fair will release the second half tomorrow. It's worth noting that all of this additional pre-second trial publicity could wind up forcing a change of venue if either side argues it can't seat an impartial jury. In the newsroom, I'm Mary Saladna, WCVB News Center.
Yeah, no one's going to say this was a piece of crap. No one's going to say, wow, Vanity Fair really jumped the shark with this. Although they have been jumping the shark for basically since Dominic Dunn left. I think they may have had one or two good articles on other topics, but our national true crime reporting is all like this. It's so pro-criminal. It's so just filled with innocence fraud tactics and basically innocence fraudsters writing for the defense team as another arm of the defense team. It's like, how much of this can you take? Speaking of another arm of the wing of the defense team, let's look at and I think this is Channel 10 and NBC. I stuck these two together. Take a listen.
Living for 3 days in Karen Reed's home with no questions off the table. That's the premise of a new profile in Vanity Fair. NBC 10's Eli Rosenberg joins us live in Boston with the key takeaways from that Vanity Fair piece. Eli.
And Corey, the writer of this article, really had unprecedented access when we're talking about those 3 days, 72 hours living with Karen Reed inside her home. Karen Reed talking about how much she owes in legal fees. It's a lot in the millions, and what she plans to do next. Tonight, Karen Reed, in her own words again, saying in a new Vanity Fair article she isn't going anywhere ahead of a second murder trial. Saying, quote, as scary as a potential conviction is, I will go to jail for something I didn't do before I plea out. I will never give them that win. Part one of a new Vanity Fair article released this morning. Reed taking the unusual.
Right. I mean, this is the feeling when people said, oh, is she negotiating a plea deal? Karen Reed has the personality, that psychopathic, narcissistic personality of never admitting that she did this, never admitting. I mean, they have her dead to rights. I mean, there's more evidence in this case than most of the cases I talk about, from her own statements to the witnesses to all the different kinds of evidence. And instead, she very successfully went out and through Aidan Carney created an army, a terrorizing army that will shut up anyone who disagrees with her and also make the legal system stand down. I mean, she's really manipulated the legal system. You know, it just came out recently that they had a grand jury wouldn't indict her for witness harassment. And you've seen the evidence. I've gone through some of it, but it's pretty clear that she orchestrated that through Aidan Carney. But they're going to try Aidan Carney, but not try her for it. It's absurd.
Usual step of.
But she's so defiant. She's never going to admit she did this. Because once she gets convicted, then she's going to go the innocence fraud route, and this thing will continue on. It will be free Karen Reed from inside, behind bars. And they'll go through every aspect of her trial, whether this was fair or that fair, and look for a loophole. Try to get her out somehow. She'll marshal every resource, guys. Every
Inviting
resource.
Julie Miller, who wrote the Vanity Fair article, to spend 3 days living with her this past August.
It's unheard of that they speak to the press in general, never mind allowing a journalist to come into your home without an attorney present.
Reed telling Miller that she still owes her so-called dream team of lawyers more than $5 million in legal fees. And is currently living off what remains of her 401k. John O'Keefe was found dead outside the Canton home of a fellow Boston police officer in January 2022. Prosecutors allege Reed hit O'Keefe with her SUV and left him for dead. But Reed's lawyers have maintained O'Keefe was attacked inside the house, with Miller saying Reed's legal team obtained the carpet from inside that house and is currently storing it for testing. And all of this comes a day after Reed's lawyers were in a civil courtroom looking to delay the wrongful death suit against her until after her second criminal trial.
We have a new prosecutor. How are they going to be trying the case? Things like that. So this sort of shifts the focus back into Karen Reed's perspective. And I think, that's why they're making $5 million. They're good at their jobs.
So this is actually just part one. With part two, another article from this author in Vanity Fair set to come out tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, they're good at their job. They've been totally in a witness harassment campaign and bamboozling the court with leaking things to Aidan Carney and then calling it and then citing it in their own legal briefs. Totally going beyond the rules of the court. But yeah, they're great lawyers. Great lawyers don't need to commit this kind of fraud. These are fraudulent lawyers, I would argue, in my opinion.
And all of this comes as Karen Reed is getting ready for her next court appearance. That's going to be here at the Supreme Judicial Court in Boston. She's going to be here next week. She's looking to get that second murder trial thrown out. Live in Boston, Eli Rosenberg, NBC 10 Boston.
New at 11, the second part of Vanity Fair's profile on Karen Reed. It is out this morning, and it contains new details about this controversial case. So here's some of the key takeaways that we have learned. Vanity Fair, they asked a professor at Purdue's Department of Computer and Information Technology to evaluate the testimony about Jennifer Cabe's "How long to die in the cold" Google search. Now, he believes Reed's expert, who said the search was conducted at 2:27 in the morning.
Isn't that a shocker? Isn't that shocker that Julie Miller's absolute love letter piece to Karen Reed, they found an expert in it that believes Karen Reed's expert, that was debunked 57 different ways on the stand, so much so that they had to change the word, change the actual software so it couldn't be misunderstood in the same way that Reed's expert misunderstood it and came up with that stupid 227 search. I mean, this is really out there to brainwash the public. So, for all the free Karen readers, if you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. I mean, you're being suckered by a psychopath. I mean, this woman is so heartless. And there's one part of the article where she talks about looking at John O'Keefe's memorial service with the bagpipes and, a police officer's memorial service and all the people lined up, and how awful it is, and how the same people are there that took part in his murder. I mean, she wasn't there, but it's awful. We have to get rid of these kind of honoring police officers. I mean, give me a break. I mean, awful values.
Just hours before John's body was found. Vanity Fair spoke to one of those jurors who believes 100% that Reed was framed. Reed also...
Really, shockingly, Julie Miller didn't talk to any of the jurors who thought Karen Reed was guilty. Isn't this a shocker, guys? Isn't this 100% a shocker? Julie Miller happened to talk to everyone she seemed to talk to, seemed to think Karen Reed is innocent. What a shocker. Oh.
Revealed that she has carpeting from the Alberts' former home in a temperature-controlled storage unit. She's hoping to get enough money to test it for blood and DNA evidence. If you're new to this story here, Karen Reed is accused of hitting and killing her boss.
Hey, free Karen Reed suckers. She needs more money, guys. She needs more money. She just needs a little bit of money to test the carpet. Hey, free Karen Reed suckers. Don't you want to give just a little bit of more of your money to this psychopath so she can test the carpet and find nothing? Test the carpet, wink, wink. Oh, does that make your stomach turn? Anyone else over this? I'm so over it. Let's look at some highlights from the article before we talk about some other things, like what's in the article and the civil suit that's going on. So they mentioned the civil suit could be messed up by this. Of course, Karen Reed's like, the irony of this is that Karen Reed gives this long 3-day interview, this sleepover party with Julie Miller, when she's saying that she absolutely cannot be deposed under oath in the civil suit from John O'Keefe's family because it could jeopardize her trial. But she's free to talk to Julie Miller all day long. And an interesting part of the Julie Miller article, she says that Karen Reed had some Laura Mercier, which is expensive, some kind of expensive makeup. I can't remember whether it was moisturizer or I think it was foundation. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But Julie Miller catalogs what is in Karen Reed's bag, some Laura Mercier moisturizer. And of course, David Rudolph's book. Like David Rudolph. So if you don't know who David Rudolph is, he was Michael Peterson's lawyer. So Michael Peterson was convicted of killing his wife, Kathleen Peterson. And after a documentary and another innocence fraud campaign, instead of being retried, because his case was undone due to the blood spatter expert, Dwayne Deaver, said he had testified in so many trials when he only testified in this many trials, right? So David Rudolph, Michael Peterson's lawyer, wrote this book about all the injustice that he's encountered in our justice system and how we have to have pushing a restorative justice, meaning a pro-criminal view of our justice system. And Karen Reed is reading that book, and coincidentally, it's Karen Miller who also wrote an article, very pro Michael Peterson article. So she's brushing up on the Michael Peterson case and that fraud and Julie Miller's background, to have something to talk to Julie Miller about, to bond with her about, and as well as sharpen up her own innocence fraud skills. Okay, here we go. So let's look at some of these. So the second arrest, so this is a Karen Reed. This is from the article by Julie Miller. The second arrest was Yannetti and Reed's first clue that something, hold on one second, something was, as they say, amiss. Quote, it was so dirty and underhanded, excuse me, just had a glare on my computer screen, that they would go behind my back, unquote, Yannetti said. Yannetti told me by phone. Sorry, I have the worst. Hold on, let me see if I can move this forward. Okay, here we go. The DA requested Reed's bail be set at $500,000. Quote, I believe it was a scare me and get some kind of plea deal going, unquote, Reed says of the second arrest. Do 2 years or less manslaughter charge and you'll be free, which we were never going to consider. As Reed's second arraignment, Yannetti argued that his client had no reason to flee, but Crohn's disease and multiple sclerosis treatments were in Boston. Canone set Reed's bail at a comparatively low $100,000. You know what they leave out, though? They leave out her first arraignment. Her first arraignment. Does anybody remember that? Does anybody remember Yannetti when he said she had some kind of brain tumor? Well, you don't have to remember it because I actually happen to have it on hand. Let's take a listen.
To the mic.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning again, Your Honor. David Yannetti for Karen Reed. Judge, my client is 41 years old with no criminal record. My client grew up in Taunton, Massachusetts. She's a graduate of Coyle Cassidy High School in 1998. And when it came time to go to college, she stayed in Massachusetts and went to Bentley College. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Finance in 2003. And since then has worked in the financial sector. And in fact, she's been at a very large, well-known financial company since 2007, where she's currently an equity analyst. In addition, she's an adjunct professor at a Massachusetts university as well, and she's been there since 2008. In addition, Judge, my client suffers from a host of medical issues. From the time that she was 25, she's had multiple serious illnesses diagnosed, beginning in 2005 with colitis, which ultimately led to her colon being completely removed in 2009. She's been in pain for a number of years, and eventually also was diagnosed with MS as well in 2013. Continued to have digestion issues and bowel issues, and this past summer my client unfortunately was diagnosed with having a brain tumor as a result of migraines that she had never had before, There is still no answer regarding whether that brain tumor is cancerous or not. And I bring
Here's her disappearing brain tumor. Anybody remember that? No mention of that. No mention, never to be mentioned again, was her brain tumor. Strangely, John O'Keefe's sister, Kristen, died of brain cancer. I mean, you just look at that arraignment and you see all the O'Keefe family just weeping in the front row, and it just tears your heart out. And then you look at Karen Reed with a mask on, looking like Hannibal Lecter, with her blank stare. It's hard to take. So going on, Reed gave her first months, God, this is hard to read here, gave her first months after O'Keefe's death mourning him. Okay, spent her first months after O'Keefe's death mourning him, reminiscing and trying to distract herself from her predicament. She wallpapered the house, cooked with her mother, and read Alexander Dumas's classic, The Count of Monte Cristo, in which the protagonist is framed and arrested, but ultimately escapes and avenges himself, has been an inspiration. Oh, it's just like The Count of Monte Cristo, isn't it? If the Count of Monte Cristo had hit his police officer girlfriend going backwards and reverse 24 miles an hour, never putting on the brakes once. Reed was still so confounded by O'Keefe's death that she was open to the idea that she could have accidentally hit him. I told my parents, if I did anything in any way, I'll pay my dues, she says now. That's how this should work. I want to know the truth, good, bad, or ugly. Yeah, you know the truth, Karen Reed. You know the truth. It's not a mystery. You don't need to find it out. I mean, you immediately went and started planning how to cover this up and went and collected your marks to go watch you be in hysterics as you, quote unquote, found John O'Keefe's body. Strangely knew right where it was. Innocence Fraud Watch had a good blog on this. Apparently, Kevin Lenahan from Yellow Cottage Tales and Karen from True Crime Wine did an entire episode talking about how we're the same person and how terrible I am. I'd advise them to check their facts to make sure that is so before they continue on that line. But I'm sure Kevin, as he always is, so convinced that his Mensa-like powers of deduction are right, that anything he thinks in his head is true, that he will continue on with this nonsense. To his gullible followers. Killer Karen Reed retrial, murderers, latest abuse by proxy leaps out from pages of innocence fraudster and gaslighter Julie Miller's tale for Vanity Fair. And she quotes the quote I just read. I told my parents if I did anything in any way, I'll pay my dues. I want to know the truth, good, bad, and ugly. Elephant in the room. On October 29th, 2024, Vanity Fair published a story by innocence fraudster and gaslighter Julie Miller, headed Karen Reed Tells Her Story, Part 1, A Murder Trial in Massachusetts. Julie Miller appears to have a penchant for embedding herself with killers, as can be seen here and here. And those two articles lead one to the article about Michael Peterson's terrible time he's having and the Menendez brothers and their terrible time that they're having. And like other and like every other shill who has written about killer Karen Reed, Julie Miller has also chosen so far to avoid mentioning Karen's trial about Richie the Mansfield plumber. Tale about Richie the Mansfield plumber, excuse me. So do you guys remember that? So in the last text messages between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, Karen Reed says, yeah, I'd love to come out and meet you guys for drinks, but I have a plumber here. And he's like, John O'Keefe is saying, well, I would have had my dad, who is a plumber, come over and look at it and fix it. You didn't have to hire a plumber to come over at 8 or 9 o'clock at night to your house. It just seemed like a lie that was made up by Karen Reed, and odd to make him jealous, and just an odd lie to fix her hot water. And it just sort of hung there. Like there was all these text messages going back and forth about the plumber. And you can see that John O'Keefe is annoyed by it. And you would have thought one of the points that Innocence Fraud Watch makes is that when they finally met for drinks, the first thing out is, how did you get on with the plumber? How did that work out? Is your hot water fixed? But the plumber has never been found and interviewed. It never came up in trial. Richie the plumber wasn't a witness. And this time around with a new prosecutor, we would hope that this would be explored, because this could be an area where there was tension between the two of them. Hold on one second. Okay. Among a plethora of other highly significant components surrounding the facts of the case against her, in her story, Julie Miller quotes Karen Reed, who states, "If I can get the entire truth of this case out in the public forum, that to me is priceless." Meaning, if I can get my innocence narrative out into the public and get enough people to believe it, that's priceless. That's better than paying my $5 million defense team, if that's really what it is. I don't think so. I mean, I would think that was an exaggeration, but I have no way of knowing. Intentionally withholding truth. Karen Reed has been intentionally withholding large chunks of the, quote, entire truth of this case, unquote, from the people she and her enablers are choosing to hoodwink. And she has also gone out of her way to keep her tale about the plumber away from the public forum, quote unquote. Because tensions were brewing between John O'Keefe and Karen Reed on the night of January 28, 2022, relating to her plumbing issue tale, along with numerous other issues, when Karen Reed arrived at C.F. McCarthy's pub at around 8:51 p.m., John was unaware of what arrangements Karen had made with the plumber, and when Richie would be returning to Karen's home in Mansfield after his supposed eventual trip to Home Depot. Think about that for a moment. What would have been one of the first questions John O'Keefe would have asked Karen Reed when she got settled at C.F. McCarthy's? Right? John O'Keefe's feelings irrelevant. Michael Camerano, who went with John O'Keefe to C.F. McCarthy's that evening, testified to the grand jury that John had been annoyed with Karen because she had not asked him to fix her plumbing issues. Karen Reed argued in her January 5th, 2024, defendant's motion to dismiss indictment and memorandum in support of herself that John O'Keefe's feelings were irrelevant. Reed has poured over tens of thousands of pages of legal filings and police reports. She has scanned every text, screenshot, and Google search on O'Keefe's phone for buried clues. Karen Reed, sometime in August 2024, just shut off house alarm. Karen had told John in a text message at around 8:28 p.m. before she drove from her home in Mansfield to Washington Street in Canton that she could either just shut off her house alarm and presumably give the plumber a spare key to let himself in, or meet Richie the plumber at her house the following day. John O'Keefe had texted Karen Reed, "Tell him to leave it. I'll take care of it Sunday or Monday." In response, Karen Reed had stated, "No, it's okay. I can either meet him here or just shut off the alarm. Even Julie Miller cannot magic away key physical evidence. Did Karen Reid shut off her alarm? What did she tell John? We know she told Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe that she wasn't meant to stay in Canton last night. To date, Karen Reid has chosen to ghost her plumbing issue tale and has failed to explain when, if at all, Richie returned to resolve her, quote, hot water issue, as alleged by her to John O'Keefe in writing only a few hours before she chose to reverse into him. In the process, choosing to ignore the fully working auditory and visual cues, from her infotainment system, where clipping John with her SUV. So her SUV, so what Innocence Fraud Watch means here is that her SUV flashed and beeped when you were about to hit something. So it would be like beep, 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 beep. And so it got like more intense and louder the closer you got to hit something. She could not have missed that. So it would be like beep, 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 beep. Like really, for 24 seconds. It's beeping at her as she's going in reverse, never once hitting the brake. Think about that. Karen Reid's last two messages to John O'Keefe on January 28, 2022, which she sent him at around 8:35 p.m., seemingly before she set off for McCarthy's in Canton from her house in Mansfield, read, "Maybe I'll come back late tonight. Bad snow is in the early a.m. I'll head up there in a few minutes. Let me know if you leave." Again, what did Karen Reid tell John O'Keefe about how things were left between her and the plumber when she arrived at McCarthy's? And when did Karen arrange for the plumber to return to replace the alleged piece that was all rusted, quote unquote? Maybe Julie Miller will address Richie the plumber in her part too. I think we're all disappointed. In the meantime, you can read her other piece about Kevin Lenahan from Yellow Cottage Tales, and his close-mindedness stops him from understanding the relevance of why murderer has ghosted her alleged Mansfield plumber, Richie. Predictable innocence fraud fantasy narrative. According to trickster Julie Miller, the Commonwealth's key physical evidence against Karen Reid has been her right taillight. Julie Miller also states, Reid says that she always considered the taillight to be the cornerstone of the whole case. So that's something they do in innocence fraud cases, which is reduce all the evidence, the totality of the evidence, to one piece of evidence. Because anybody can be on the fence, not believe, put a chip in, or debunk entirely one piece of evidence, but it's much harder to debunk the totality of the evidence in this cases, which is why it's so important for these innocence fraud narratives to reduce things to either one narrative, like in the West Memphis 3, they just didn't like the West Memphis 3 and they all wore black t-shirts and listened to Metallica instead of, or one piece of evidence like the taillight. In this case, in reality, there is a wealth of key physical evidence against Karen Reid, and I'll just skim past it here. The broken glass at the crime scene in the grate of the SUV bumper, along with the pieces of broken glass which were removed from Karen Reid's crime scene, which matched the cocktail glass John O'Keefe was last seen carrying from the Waterfall bar, which also matched glass pieces found in the grate of the near bumper of her SUV. And wasn't there glass found in John O'Keefe's, was that the taillight or was that the glass in his shirt? Hair and DNA. More key physical evidence against Reid was a strand of John O'Keefe's hair, along with his DNA, both of which were found on the right near side of Karen Reid's SUV. Now, Karen Reid's supporters will say that John O'Keefe used the right rear side of Karen Reid's SUV as a pillow, but I think it's more likely that the DNA came from Karen Reid hitting John O'Keefe 24 miles an hour in reverse, never once hitting the brake. Julie Miller states she wonders whether she had accidentally backed her vehicle into John O'Keefe that evening before, left Nike sneaker. Other key evidence was John O'Keefe's left black Nike sneaker. It is not uncommon for victims of motor vehicle homicide to lose one or both items of footwear due to the force on impact of a vehicle, of a car strike. Okay, vehicle. I can say vehicle, but not vehicular. I don't know. My tongue is all tied tonight. John O'Keefe's sneaker was recovered by a CERT team member after being found buried under the snow up against the curb in the vicinity near to where Karen had clipped John when she chose to reverse into him, ignoring her fully working vehicle auditory and visual cues. And the drinking straw and blood, and then her taillight confession, which I think, so they found John O'Keefe's blood, which was both photographed on the yard and also physically recovered from Karen's crime scene, was yet more physical key evidence against Reed, as was a black drinking straw, which had been captured on a surveillance camera sticking out of the drink John O'Keefe had carried out of the waterfall bar to Karen Reed, which contained her remaining vodka and soda drink, which John had brought her at around 11:58 p.m. Taillight confession. There was also over 40 pieces of Karen Reed smashed to smithereens. Taillight recovered from her crime scene over a period of several days due to the melting of the snow, making it easier to locate these plastic, clear, and red pieces. Karen Reed confessed to having smashed her rear taillight before she left John O'Keefe's house to head to his garage at around 5 a.m. And you can read more about how murderer confessed to Matthew and Jennifer McCabe she had smashed her taillight to smithereens before orchestrated 5:07 a.m. love tap in driveway here. So that the link to this is in the description of this episode. Great piece by Innocence Fraud Watch. Heisenberg says, I believe the whole thing is going to end with Karen versus Aiden against each other. Interesting theory, Heisenberg. Certainly no honor among thieves. Heisenberg says, Karen's side can say whatever they want to spin the narrative. However, she was the only driver that night from the moment she met up with him. True. I mean, I just find it a fantasy narrative that, you got to read this article. I mean, you don't. You can imagine it. If you just imagine a Penni novel or like da dump dump. That's what I was like reading it, da dump dump. And then I contacted this my minute handsome LA lawyer who had the former prosecutor, Alan Jackson, who had once won the case against Phil Spector. Never mind, he had to do it twice, but okay. Okay, eventually he won it. And he said he gets, hundreds of requests to represent him, but this one stood out to him. I'm up against a blue wall of silence. I can't even do her accent right. But and then I looked at the picture and doggone it, bump bump, they were dog bites. But dump bump. That's always just so absurd. The middle-aged, minute LA lawyer thought these are dog bites with his vast expertise of dog bites. I mean, which would strangely be her defense. I mean, if you believe this nonsense in Vanity Fair, I mean, if you ever wondered why Donald Trump, I'm not talking about his politics, but if you're ever just wondering why his phrase, fake news and his hatred of the media resonated so much. I mean, people like Julie Miller and the pieces that she writes are reasons why, because because we have the First Amendment, there's no punishment for writing things that are untrue, and we don't have the fairness doctrine anymore. So we don't have to represent different views or make things even seem, unbiased or fair. This is entirely, I would call it a propaganda piece for Karen Reed, disguised as a journalistic news story. So, finishing up, we'll take one more look at how the news reported it, and then we're going to look at the civil case.
Accused killer Karen Reed firing back at prosecutors and vowing to fight the charges against her. She says no matter what it takes. Reed opening up in an interview with Vanity Fair magazine. And the interview itself was unusual, if you will. The reporter stayed in Karen Reed's house for 3 days. She even slept there.
You guys, did you get that it was unusual? It was an unusual article. It was unusual. Keyword unusual. That's what all the news sources. No, none of them are saying, hey, you're making our profession look like a joke, Julie Miller. It's just unusual, unorthodox.
And said that no topic was off limits.
So Karen Reed's awaiting her second trial for the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The first trial ended with a hung jury. According to the article, Reed is now living off her 401k. She sold her house to pay her legal bills and still owes her lawyers $5 million. But she says, quote, I'm not backing down now. As scary as a potential conviction is, I will go to jail for something I didn't do before I plead out. I will never give them that win. Reed accuses police of framing her, focusing on her SUV, which you see here in the video shown at the trial. Prosecutors say she hit O'Keefe with the car, and pieces of a broken taillight were found at the scene. But she claims the light was not smashed until after police seized it. She says, quote, it's the only concrete evidence that connects me to that crime scene. No evidence was found until they had the evidence. This is just part one of the interview, by the way. Vanity Fair plans to release the rest of it tomorrow.
Right. Release the rest of it tomorrow. But there's also a civil suit that Karen is arguing. She can't talk about any of this, can't be deposed under oath because it would ruin her criminal trial, but she can talk to Vanity Fair. So there was a hearing in her civil case, which she didn't show up to a couple of days back. And let's look at the reporting on that.
Late today was the first hearing in the civil case. The family of Reed's late boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, is suing Reed for wrongful death. Reed and other defendants want that lawsuit to be put on hold until after her second criminal trial is complete.
Our David Bienick is covering all angles of both the civil case and the criminal case against Reed. He's live outside court in Brockton, where today's hearing just wrapped up. David.
Jessica, good afternoon. Karen Reed did not attend this first hearing in the civil case against her here at the courthouse in Brockton, but John O'Keefe's brother Paul and his mother Peg, they were both in attendance in the courtroom. Attorneys for Reed and two other defendants argued it would be a minor inconvenience to delay the proceedings in the O'Keefe's wrongful death lawsuit against Reed until after her second criminal trial is over. They say forcing her to testify in the civil case now would violate Reed's Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate herself. But the O'Keefe's attorneys say Reed is trying to have it both ways by trying to delay talking to them for a sworn deposition while at the same time freely talking in public and in the media.
So, she wants to talk to the media where she's not under oath. There's no punishment for lying to the media. And she can continue to put out her fake ridiculous story to the public and vie for sympathy and for support. And their lawyer looks actually pretty good, the O'Keefe lawyer here.
Karen Reed is overtly weaponizing the Fifth Amendment to her advantage. Karen Reed is not allowed to use the Fifth Amendment as both a sword and a shield.
The O'Keefe family is also suing 2 bars in Canton, which served Karen Reed alcohol the night that John O'Keefe died. The bars also want the civil lawsuit put on hold until after the criminal trial is over. That criminal trial is scheduled to start in January. Now, the civil court judge here today said that he would think about the arguments from both sides before issuing an order about whether to delay. Live in Brockton, David Bienick, WCVB News Center 5.
Okay, so that's pretty much what I have for today. That is the full Karen Reed. Where have we been going for like an hour? Yeah, I'm just not having it with D. Sorry, I'm not having it today. Not in the mood. I'm happy to not ever talk about Kevin ever again if he would stop yet flapping his lips about me and putting out false information from the, like, as he always does, from the recesses of his imagination, accusing me of leading a double life. I mean, I'm very flattered that he thinks that I can write an entire another blog, that I wouldn't want to write it under my name somehow, assume another identity, and keep a full-time blog going, in addition to keeping this channel going and everything I do here and all the Patreon episodes and everything else I do. Keep a full-time identity going. I mean, that's like, in addition, and continuing to put out this like conspiracy story that I wasn't upset, that the whole reason I devoted an entire episode to talking about my issue with him featuring a killer from prison and ghosting his killer's victim, never mentioning her name, and entirely hosting his killer as some kind of a profiler, and how dangerous it was to bring. I had issue with that. Kevin's like, oh no, it wasn't an issue with that. He wrote me behind the scenes saying, do you have an issue with everyone who interviews a killer? Pretty much. Take a look back at my 585, 86 episodes, Kevin. You're just finding out about it now. Yeah. Done so many episodes on my issue with just this. Treating victims poorly, interviewing killers. That's exactly my problem. He's like, oh, it's because of Grant. I had blocked Grant at that time. I had my own issues with Grant, saying that Karen Reed, he looked into Karen Reed's eyes and he thought she was sorry. I was like, oh, it's a little too much. But if Kevin can imagine it, he's going to just like put it out into the public domain as true. And no matter what you show him, if he's imagining it in his head, it's reality. And that is the main issue with his reporting. Is his ego is so large. I mean, it really looks like he's trying to start a cult over there. Just trust me. Go with it. Trust me. Rallying the troops over there. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to justice for John O'Keefe. So I don't like to kick people out, but I'm just not in the mood today for this nonsense. Vanity Fair has put me over the edge. So that's what I have for today, guys. Please hit the like, subscribe, share this episode, and I'll be back with another episode real soon, probably tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'll see you guys then. I'm going to end the way I do so many of these episodes with my hit single, I Hit My Boyfriend With My Car. Song I wrote, music by AI. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with love. clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mom. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet. I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system, my clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry,